draft. So it's completely up to scratching out or redoing or just adopting as is, whatever you'd like to do. But perhaps we could go paragraph by paragraph maybe, or section by section. How about we do that?
Yeah.
And I will ask Rebecca if she has any questions regarding this. She put the draft together with the help of Chris and Beth. And if Beth, you have anything before we start off?
No, I think Rebecca and I visited earlier, so just kind of work through it and we'll answer questions. And then we have some clarification on the discussion from last time too. Sorry.
So as we get started here tonight, you guys have a lot of papers in front of you. So I'm going to go over a little bit of housekeeping so you know what you're looking at tonight. You have the draft policies. This is taking this section here, which starts with economic development policy. This piece was current. This is what is actually on the books as of today. And the one that says draft is what we're trying to take these policies and kind of create one more modern, comprehensive policy, utilizing our best knowledge and skills and some of the feedback we've received to date. So as you might remember from the last work session, some of the big changes we had is we added some sections. We added an RHID policy, we added a spec building policy, and we added a matrix to help determine that tax abatement. So those are the three big changes that you'll see in the new draft. The other items on your bench tonight is the firm data sheet, and this is a printed of a workable spreadsheet calculation that Beth uses and was asked for at the end of last work session. So this is just here for your reference. Obviously, without it being filled out, it's sometimes, I think, a little hard, but she's more than happy to explain or let you understand. But this helps to hopefully answer some of the questions that came up about what types of information does the EDC utilize in helping us make that return on investment information. Lastly, part 2 of tonight's agenda is actually reviewing the commission policies as a whole. And that's the other big document you'll have, which says Commission Policy Manual. This will be a secondary portion if we have the time tonight. The city clerk and I have been working to update these policies. It's been on the to-do list for a long time, and since we had to remove some of them to create this, it was a good time to go through them one by one already. So since we were half done, we might as well bring you where we had gotten to that point. So that's just hopefully a little bit of an overview of why you have so many papers in front of you today.
Don't we have a policy that we don't ever look at more than one policy per meeting?
We can add that.
This copy that you gave us, is it any different than the first one that we
It is not.
received? Okay, good.
It is not. There have been, at the end of last work session, the notes that I had, and I emailed you all, and hopefully we were able to see those emails that came through as you was an ask for the firm data input sheet from the EDC and how they utilize that to help calculate the ROI with CEDBR, or whomever they're contracted with at the time. There was a question about the full-time equivalency definitions, and Beth and I spoke, and we proposed that we just take out the definition and leave the FTE portion of that. And then the last item, I can't remember.
In the email.
Oh, the NACES codes for the wage and salary criteria. You'll notice that is in the new job description, but it doesn't actually affect the percentages that you could get in a tax abatement. That's just more for reference. So if you're opening this policy and you're wondering, is there a wage or salary criterion, this kind of just reverts you back to the process that the Harvey County EDC would be doing, because all of those types of incentives would be going through the Harvey County EDC.
Yeah. So when you apply for state incentives, there's a lot of criteria with your wage and things, and we were trying to look at it and make it so that it's easier for the company. So we're not saying you have this wage requirement to qualify for state incentives and this for the city. We want to try to be as uniform as possible so that they're not trying to juggle different compliance for different entities. So I think we've done that by kind of taking out specific things and leaving it as the NAICS code. It helps us be in line with what the state's asking too. And then on the full-time employees, taking out that hourly that Rebecca mentioned, I think it had the total hours if you were a 40-hour work week for 52 weeks of the year, and not all of employers are a 40-hour work week. The state doesn't specify that. I went and looked at a couple other policies that were local ones to cities to see if they had that in there, and they didn't. And so I think just leaving that out and not putting the criteria will be more inclusive. And then on the firm data sheet that's in there, every time I come to you and hand you that paper that has the return on investment, the cost benefit analysis, you just see the output and you don't see the input of what information we're asking the company for. We're not only asking the company for the information, we will reach out to the city and say, if you're doing a cost share on this water line extension, what's the estimate for that? And we put that estimate in it. We can then go back after everything's complete, like we do with the company, and get the real numbers from what that costs the city and run the cost benefit for when we send it all into the Board of Tax Appeals too. So we do our best to give as much accurate information on the input side as we can.
So that kind of gets us back to where we ended, I think, at our last work session. So if there aren't any other questions or comments that we want to address right now, I would start leading us through at the beginning unless there's something else we should address first. Okay. Beginning in section 1, we have a purpose and an overview. And this is just a very simple policy statement that talks about encouraging growth, fitting the need of our residents and our businesses, and then giving some examples of incentives. Well, it might seem like it's not very, not really the nuts and bolts of what you're doing. This, I think, is really, really important so that if you do have somebody opening the policy for the first time, they can know what to expect, and it kind of gives them that really quick overview, kind of jumping right into the nuts and bolts without understanding the purpose and the mission and the mindset can be a little bit much. So we don't usually do that. We do talk about citing our public improvement finance policy. That is something that you've also seen as well. That has to do with what we have as requirements for the way we operate in the financial piece of that. In your section 2, we talk about eligibility. There is a question here about if there should be a capital investment ratio for a 2-to-1. That just means, are you expecting your developer that comes to you to be putting in twice the amount of the city's piece? That's up for discussion, but it would be a really good point to have some good input on before we would to adopt something. If you wanted a criterion like this, or not like this, or something similar, this number does come from looking at similar communities and other development policies that have put this 2-to-1 ratio forward.
I read this from real hard from the developer side, and I think we might want to, like, minimum private to public capital investment, maybe put in parentheses city's investment into project. Because when I read that the first time, it was like, as a developer, just so there's no misunderstanding what you're talking about there.
Okay.
Have you seen similar language elsewhere that you could direct staff to look at?
Usually just say city input, city improvements, city input improvements into the project. I don't have any trouble with the terminology. I just want to make sure they understand what it is.
I have a question that maybe even ties in with that, and I don't know if we want to detail it or not. Does that public capital investment or the city improvements, we just talked about that sometimes we include, say, a water line or capital infrastructure, cities, public infrastructure that needs to be built for whatever this development is. Should we include that? Should that not be included? I think that's something that would be good for us to have direction on. And maybe even it gets listed if it's available.
Well,
because
to me, it needs to be stated that it needs to be considered, and not a hard line one way or the other, but it needs to be considered before we give them the final decision. Makes
So
sense to
maybe
me.
a little bit of language detailing that, just so
Yeah,
it's clear, because even
yeah.
from the
We're-
developer's
this is
perspective, they
close.
may not know.
Well, what you don't want is a developer to read it and think, well, and you don't even know you missed out on an opportunity.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
All right, so my notes then would be to clarify that the public investment would be the cities and not any other public dollars of it from the state or any other source. And then to add some verbiage on the public infrastructure needs of that
I think that'd be fine.
property. Okay.
Well, so do we need to clarify that?
Just on the firm data sheet that you guys have, that would, any state incentive package that they're receiving, we put that into. So on that output, we're gonna have the state's numbers included in it. But if you're looking at a developer, I'm not running a cost benefit analysis on a project anyway. Am I overthinking this? Because if a developer is coming in and developing land, we're not running a cost benefit for that. That's something you guys would do internally. The only time I'm running a cost benefit analysis with that firm data information is if there's a real industrial project. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
I
gotcha.
think that's right.
I
Yeah.
do think that is important, though, to keep in mind that the way it's written right now, I think that would talk about, because quickly following that, we talk about the return on public investment, which is that ROI that we've talked about, setting it. In here right now, it's saying 1 to 1.3. Currently, our working policy has been that it's at 1, so it's positive, but Beth, you did share with us that 1.3 kind of seems to be.
Yeah, 1.3 is the standard for the IEDC, the Industrial Economic Development Council. Again, I don't know what that is on the retail side, and I don't know how to run a cost benefit for retail projects. So I think that there should be something in here that states that that's referring to industrial, not commercial.
Yeah.
Okay. So I can make a note to have the ratio of public benefits to public costs, each on present value basis, should be at least 1.3 for industrial. All right. Well, moving forward, we have some additional eligibility criteria. This is just a little bit of our traditional language that we put into a lot of policies, especially economic development policies, to show more of that rationality about why you give an incentive and how you would give it. Not a lot of technical nuts and bolts, but give us more the purpose, including that but-for principle that we talk about a lot. And point C is also saying that they must be current and pay of their current ad valorem taxes. Three, when I was reviewing policy considerations this afternoon, I did notice that because this was a draft, there's still pieces we need to take out of here that were in some earlier drafts. So when we talk about how you get to the percentage based on what we're adding, we do not have currently additional considerations in here. So we take out number 5. But you would have the new job creation, capital investment, the location, and the utilization of state incentives. And like we said, this is the point where, after some discussion, Beth and I felt that if we just removed the sentence that starts off as defining what an FTE is, that could help alleviate any concerns in that area. Again, the wage and salary criteria is more of a note back to how the programs would work if the developer was utilizing those other state-funded programs. And then the location, and we can clarify this just a little bit if we have things that we need to make sure, but that is, again, one of the larger percentages that you can get for having that tax abatement. So, and then the 10% for the
And I would
state
just mention that the job creation numbers, having that information is helpful to be here because we are going to use that when we go back for compliance. We don't ask for the wage information, but we do ask for the job count. The state asks for the wage information, so we would be alerted if they were falling way below or something like that.
Any questions on these pieces so far?
I just want to clarify, removing the language that defines what an FTE is, would you remove the language that says the city's preference? It is the city's preference that the new jobs be full-time positions with competitive benefits. That one's also being scratched out.
I would leave that.
You could leave that.
Yes,
Just the
just the
previous-
definition
Just
of
the
an FTE.
definition. I would fall back that if we had a problem with somebody, that we would fall back on Department of Labor or State Department of Labor's definition of an FTE at that point in time. But,
Yeah.
so I think that's a good in between. Keep that last sentence, but strike the duplicitous definition.
I was just going to ask, how does this look when you're looking at, because we're used to the 10-year 100%. When you're looking at doing a tiered, how do you, because these are different categories, how does that look? How does that, I mean, do you have a quick example of if we were, let's say, use somebody that we've already done, how we would use this?
I think that this wouldn't become tiered at that point. It would become a 10-year 40% or whatever they qualified for. So with the tables below, you would take what they qualified for. So if they're creating 5 jobs and they are a 600,000 project and they're not in an industrial park, so let's just say those are the only 2 qualifiers, then they would receive 45% for 10
Okay.
years. So this
Okay.
does kind of take away that tiered. You could, say this is what you qualify for. Do you want to
Okay.
take what that is equal to and translate it to a tiered? But the way this reads, it does away with
The tiered and,
yeah.
okay. Thank you.
And Beth, could you speak to that just a little bit more? Because you did, I think, run through some examples on this.
We did. We went through about 5 years. We pulled projects to see what they would qualify for. Not all of them were 10-year 100%. It was across the board. We have projects that are 875,000 capital investments up to 400,000. I'm sorry, 400 million, right? 350 million. Okay, numbers are hard. We ran a lot of different scenarios, and it is, I think, very fair to the company, and it also allows them to see what they would get with their project. So I do like having this in here, and it doesn't make it where everyone just automatically qualifies.
Okay.
So.
Well, and I asked that because I know when we were dealing with this several months ago, that was the thing we mentioned, going to a tier level. And I'm not saying that that's what we have to do. I'm just, as I read through that, I got stuck in that area because I thought,
Yeah.
how would we do that with what we've already done so far? So,
And that's something I didn't think about it till you said that, but looking at the other communities that I've worked in and that I do like the way they've done it, I don't think, I'm going to go back and look now that you've brought that up, but they are tables or they're, you qualify for this amount. And so I think that must have done away with the tiered also, but I'm going to double check on
Okay.
that because I hadn't thought about it. till you
well,
said it.
that was the only other thing that we really thought of, or maybe not so much new, but, I mean, this is just looking at it at a different way.
Right, this is an alternative that we
Yeah.
didn't discuss. I mean,
No.
we did discuss kind of ad nauseum, the tiering, the stair-stepping down of the incentive as the years went on instead of.
And I think that this helps the company understand what their project gets. It takes away, saying the commission is giving this company this, but they didn't give it to me and my company. It lets them see it, and then it also, I think, alleviates that burden on you by saying, well, look to the table, and that's where we got the number.
So in the ones that you did look at over the last 5 years or whatever, how many of them maxed out at 100% versus came in at the 45 or 60%?
Yeah, I don't remember how many I pulled. I pulled probably 10, and I would say at least 6 of them were a 10-year 100%, and then the others weren't. We gave a different amount than what so it did help us see that we have been, I mean, when we don't have something to look at, it's easier to be
Generous.
subjective. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. But I think that there were 6 of them that if we looked at this, what we have here, they wouldn't have qualified for that.
Right.
And I think this backs it up when you say, I'm offering you or this is what you qualify for. So I like it.
Well, it balances the support with the investment coming into the community, and it alleviates some of that burden off of the shoulders of our taxpayers, and gives staff guidance to work with.
And then, of course, when you say that there are some that may qualify for 100%, then we're back at that same table of explaining to our citizens how we arrived at that, because that 100% is the one thing I think we were in hopes of trying to get away
So-
from to some degree.
I think that the ROI, that 1.3, and making sure that we have a positive return on investment wherever you're at. So that's what this gets us. So even though it's not getting in the numbers for each project, it shows you that you would have above a 1.3. So that's the kind of the explanation that a company might not qualify for a 10-year 100%, but they wouldn't be at a 1.3. So you're always using that kind of as your baseline. So
Okay,
for every
we can
tax
see
dollar
that.
you're giving up for an incentive, you're getting that $1.30 back, whether it's a 10-year 20% or 10-year 30% tax abatement, or I think that's kind of how you can.
No, I see what you're alluding to, so.
Is there a reason why we total more than 100% across the 4 categories? So math me through that.
I think what you're looking at here is potentials. So I think we might need to add something that says you couldn't get above that, but we need to be able to allow for differences so that we can be more flexible. Maybe you're going to have a very, very large investment, but smaller employment numbers, and we want to be able to respect those differences in companies that come to town, so that we're still recognizing that level, whatever that might look like at that point.
So take Millennium Machine and Tool, for example. They're not going to be located in number 3. And so they would never get that 30%, but their project could be a huge capital investment, and they should be allowed another way to get to 100% if their project numbered out at a 1.3. So I think that's kind of how you would.
We're just trying to open up as many avenues as possible for those really good investments in our community to be able to take advantage of these programs that we have to encourage the growth that we're looking for.
I understand that. I wonder if this is a whole lot of work if we're going to build a chart that you can always get to 100. Whereas, the commission could always say, no, those don't add up enough. We think that it garners more support than the standing policy. So I'm wondering if the policy needs to just be a little bit tighter, and that would give the commission the ability to.
I would say it's all on the table, and it's what's important to you. I mean, when we had these discussions earlier, I questioned even whether location should be given that much weight. I mean, what are the big drivers? Obviously, job creation, capital investment, but you're getting a 30% bump just for that location. Does that really matter to the commission?
Right.
Or is job creation more important, and that should get you higher? But I mean, I agree with what Rebecca's saying. There needs to be different ways to get to 100. If someone's going to invest a ton of money or be a huge employer, they should be able to get to 100%. But you're right, it shouldn't be so easy that you plug it in and you always get 100% tax abatement.
Right.
But I mean, this isn't take it or leave it. You guys should give
No,
direction to
that's
staff
why we're having that
to
combo.
tweak it 100%.
I mean,
This is pretty standard that they have 140% possible. So I don't know if somebody would read somebody else's policy and think that theirs is better than ours, so we don't even.
I guarantee you, they read others, and
Yeah.
because they'll use it against us.
Yeah, sure.
Well, Beth, didn't you say that if we went back and reassessed those 6 out of the 10 that had the 100%, today they may not qualify,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, seems to me we still have some subjectivity or some.
I also took the Salina policy and the Wichita policy and ran with theirs to see what we were giving, and we were, they were giving more than we were. So that also helps you kind of understand. We're not being a community that's just trying to give everything away. We were still a little bit more conservative than both of those communities. And a lot of these used to be online, a lot of these, and you can't find them now. They pulled them off, and I think that's because communities are
Right, I
comparing
was
what
kind of
it is.
going
So they can
where
have
Chris was
direct
going. Maybe
contact.
location needs to be something that's renewed under a resolution every periodic based off of where we want to drive development within our community rather than in a policy that was last looked at in 1975.
Another thing that you might consider under locations is whether it's within our currently developed sewer system. You know, are we going to have to extend a whole lot of sanitary sewer main or a whole lot of water main? That's going to be a big cost. Now, if that gets counted in when you're calculating the ROI, then maybe you're okay. But we're working on, just started this water and sewer master plan, and we're kind of at the edges of where we've developed to on some things, and we're having people ask about stuff outside of that area. So there might be something to add there to the location too.
Well, when in location, you have Kansas Logistics Park, Airport and Environs Neighborhood Revitalization Program. Well, and maybe if my ignorance is really coming through here, please let me know. Where else is there? I mean,
Down south.
Yeah.
For instance, there's
So-
this down south, say south on Kansas Avenue. We've had people asking about developing properties south of the mall, south of 36th Street. And right now, if we were going to extend sewer down there, we can only go so far. And so we'd end up having to put a lift station in and pump it up to the sewer line at, say, 36th Street. But then that takes other area that's north of 36th Street out of the area that could discharge to that main that would be right immediately adjacent to it, because you're going to run out of capacity. So I think there's some of those areas that we might, and I haven't looked at this in detail. I thought it'd be good to be fresh so we could have some discussion about it. And so that might be something that we would look at too, is
Would that be
utility.
under eligibility criteria or something to say, you know, we need to include all of those numbers, you know, because sometimes this is before that, you know, in the order of operations, they want to get their incentives and everything rolling before they're at the nuts and bolts of sewer and.
They may, and I think the thing that's important for you guys to consider, the reason that you may want to look at it here is because you've invested a lot. The city's invested a lot of money in some of this infrastructure, and you may want this other area to develop. For instance, you know, KLP definitely, you know, we extended a sanitary sewer all the way under I-135 and clear up to Southeast 12th. And so we put a lot of money in that sewer. Hey, maybe that is definitely the area we want to develop before you would go, say, south of 36th Street or something. And so give it more weight if it's within an area where you do have some of those utilities.
well, and so where I was going with that question was Kansas Logistics Park and Airport, that's, for lack of better words, pretty industrial. Neighborhood revitalization is not. So the areas that are really more developed infrastructure-wise, maybe those would not really be called special development area, because I think of special development, I think of something that's needing something. And so if you're willing to go ahead and go to this area and develop, and of course the infrastructure has to be put in, then maybe that is something that might call for more of a percentage versus those areas that already.
Maybe. Let me give you another example of something that several of you that have been on the commission for a while have seen a couple of times. Just for instance, say North 12th Street and Sherman, in that area just to the west of the interstate. there's a large piece of property there that we've had multiple times somebody come and look at, like a housing improvements, a housing development or something there. And we need some sewer extensions there, but that might be an area, you have sewer close, or have some utilities close. Maybe that's, and I don't believe that's in the neighborhood revitalization area. I don't
I don't
think it
think
is.
so.
I'm not trying
But
to
it's
muddy
kinda
it,
needs
I'm
to
just
be
trying to.
revitalized.
So there's some other things too that you could throw in as far as location, I guess is what I'm
Suzanne, would a utility would the updated master plan lend itself to a more informed conversation of whether or not the locations of where we would like for that to be? Well,
Yes.
that wouldn't cost, I guess, would be doable from a financial
Yes,
perspective.
I mean, positively, what I want this next master plan to do is bring to you, the commission, hey, we need to look, are we gonna go this way, we're gonna go this way, we're gonna go this way, we're gonna go this way, because we can't afford to go all of those directions, And I think that's something for sure you need to look at. And there's some other areas that are even within the reach of our utilities that aren't within the city limits that you may want to look at too. And I know that could be fighting words for people, but it's just something to talk about.
Could that be something we address once we have sort of these are the.
Yeah, I'm not trying to slow this down. I'm just trying to give some more.
Oh, no,
food for thought.
yes.
Well, I mean, I
Yes.
think that's where if we did an inclusion by reference that said the location is updated on this frequency and it's called out
Yeah.
under this
Be deliberate,
resolution
yeah.
Right.
or something.
No, I was just going to say something else to think about on the location is if you're an existing business that's already made the investment, like Full Vision, and let's say in 5 years, Full Vision says we're going to do another expansion, from their perspective, this would kind of not penalize them, but it's something that they wouldn't have access to. So, the location you're asking where these companies are, a lot of our existing employers, were here before the KLP was created, and they are still expanding, so.
Yeah, CVI, Millennium, I mean,
Pre-stress,
they're
yeah.
pre-stress.
One thing we do see when looking at other communities and they have development policies or development plans is something very similar to what you're speaking about, is a more annual or biannual review of that, including those locations you're wanting to grow with that full knowledge of engineering and water and wastewater capacity, so that, again, whether we adopted a development plan and cited it by reference, or whether we opened this up on an annual or biannual basis, I think that's a really important key in this process, is we don't want to let this sit too long. We want to keep it coming, and not in an extended work session, but in something where we have a couple of key items that need to be addressed on a much more frequent basis, so that we stay on top of current trends and current needs.
How are we determining the capacity for the locations or sections or whatever? You said something about we wanted to make sure we weren't over capacity in those certain locations. How do we determine that?
Well, that gets determined utilizing hydraulic engineering calculations within the sewer mains. And you look at the number of people that are discharging to the basin, or we can do actual inflow line metering, that kind of thing. And we've done a bunch of that before. But you do monitor that, and we look at there's going to be, some sewer mains that we are going to come forward when the master plan is completed, and going to say, hey, this one at this location, we really need to upsize it because development has kind of went this direction. And when it was originally put in, nobody knew it would develop in this area. And we've done one of those. Remember, we had a local realtor developer that was asking us about developing kind of around South Dillon's area and in the where Fox Ridge is. And we did an upsize to a sewer for the southern area so they'd be able to discharge. And so we weren't having backups in a certain area. So we've done some of this before.
And when those projects like the industrial projects come across, we ask that right up front, what the usage is. I'll call over to the city. And there are some times where we talk to Suzanne and say, oh, we can't do that. Suzanne's like, that's what the whole city uses in a day or something. So it's something that we ask up front before we get any further down the road.
Okay. So a section isn't necessarily like I mean, we can expand that section, like, if you want to. Like, I'm trying to think, or maybe an example, like when we say C3 or whatever section or area of Newton. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Are you talking about zoning, or you're talking about,
Maybe it's zoning.
or you're
maybe I'm
thinking
talking
about,
about zoning.
are you asking if a sewer isn't large enough, we can't expand it? Or
Yeah,
you-
yes.
Yeah, we can. It may mean several miles has to be
Okay,
upgraded, and so you weigh the costs.
okay, yeah. That's what was my question. Thank you.
I think for me, I just need to better understand the location section and understand special development area, and because it sounds like, I mean, we're talking not just industrial, but other development. And
Right.
so I guess clarifying that, or
I think that, so the ones that are here are just things that came to the top when staff did this. Obviously the logistics park is important because of the investment that's been made and trying to get that fully activated. The airport is another piece where we do have a lot of industrial property and where we also, again, have the space and the capacity to grow. The neighborhood revitalization program area was one that I actually put on there, and I did that because we do have industrial zoned areas in the core of our city that fall within that program area. And since that program acts as a rebate of taxes, I went ahead and included it, so it was just another available piece to the puzzle so we wouldn't forget about it. Again, I'm not sure how many times that would really come about, but if you, I don't have the zoning map already, but if you look at a zoning map of Newton, kind of right perpendicular to the railroad as it comes through is a strip of industrial zoned area right through the core that separates kind of the north and the southern part of the community. And so this was just a simple piece kind of by reference that it is in another area that we've already got another program set for, another set of procedures and other things. Doesn't have to stay, but just something that I included just to not forget about it. Okay.
Would you like to continue? Would you like to keep going and then maybe circle back?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we'll probably circle back to that, but keep on going.
The next piece is discussing the core pieces of the incentive agreement. You've seen plenty of development agreements come before you already. This just lays out what's included and how it works. This is really coming from our old policy. The annual reporting, the payments in lieu of taxes. This is keeping a more succinct version of what we currently have on the books. So if there's anything in here that you have questions on, or you've read over and you'd like to offer some feedback, we'd be very happy to hear that. But this is really just taking what we already have and putting it in a different format.
When would a person receiving tax abatements be required to do a payment in lieu of? Would that just be a negotiated item?
Yeah, generally speaking, a payment in lieu of taxes would be something that you would negotiate, or it could be added in as part of a clawback piece. If maybe you maybe some goals were missed and you utilize that payment in lieu of taxes to cover a gap year. There's different ways we've done it. Donna, do you have any experience?
What pilots do we have?
The only one we have is the Housing Authority right now,
And that was put into place?
years and years ago. It's so much on each rental property they have, so we get about $22,000 a year.
And the premise behind it was, do you remember?
They don't pay taxes.
So, and in perpetuity, they don't pay
Right.
taxes. So it's not like it's a, for the first 10 years off the
Now,
improvement.
this one goes
that
on
happens in-
until the contract is rewritten or whatever.
So would there ever be an industrial person that we would require to do a payment in lieu of, since they're getting a tax abatement?
You could always include that in a development agreement.
Yeah.
It's up to you on that. If they're not going to have maybe enough sales tax, or don't bring a lot more money in with people, paying people or something, maybe
Yeah.
that's something. They're getting a good tax rebate or abatement.
Maybe we should change that word required to might be negotiated or something
Yeah.
like that. Required's a pretty hard word if you read it as a developer.
Well, it's got may in front of it.
Yeah.
Well,
It's not
Yeah.
shall.
Yeah.
it's
Then
still,
city may
still,
request.
yeah,
Maybe means.
maybe
maybe or
negotiated.
Maybe not.
Let's see, yeah, that may be
Yeah.
required to make, maybe.
I'd like to share, in my experience, pilots are not, again, just in the cities that I've been at before, the pilot is not intended to replace the abatement.
Yeah.
Because then it defeats the purpose of the abatement. But I've seen pilots as sort of we're committed to being here, we're going to stick around, we're going to pay 10% of the property taxes,
I've seen
or
those.
$1,000. I mean, it could be anything, and I'm sure there's probably some science or some formulas out there that would help guide us there, but it also helps kind of bridge the gap between the services that they will receive while not paying property taxes, like fire EMS may go out there, or the police department, or, engineering services. We have permitting fees and stuff, but, so it's not made to make money or anything like that. I just wanted to share that. In my experience, they just tend to be,
It could be performance-based as well.
yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
if they didn't hit their year 2 metric for employment or whatever, a pilot could trigger for that term.
and
That-
with some
that's the
flexibility.
But it would be upfront. It would be, full disclosure, part of the agreement. Everybody understands that, because
And that's covered in the second paragraph of pilot.
so,
But I would change the word required and just put in there that there's the potential for negotiating.
Well, how about maybe necessary?
you could just flip the sentence and say, payment in lieu of taxes equal to the amount of property tax abatement. The city may request that payments in lieu of taxes equal to the amount of property tax abatement may be negotiated into the agreement or something. I mean, so you could just flip that sentence around and.
I think a lot of times cities should at least have the pilot conversation.
Don't get what you don't ask for.
That's true. Yeah.
Donna, do we have any idea that 22,000, you say we get 22,000 from the housing authority, wonder what percent that would be if all of their property was fully on the tax rolls?
I don't know.
Yeah, I know you don't know. I'm curious if that'd be, 30% or 10%
10%
or
probably.
5%.
It's way low. I'm sure it's way low.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it is too.
Is that 25% property or 12 and a half?
No, it's be considered residential, so it'll be 11.5.
Yeah,
So it'll be just like a house sitting there.
that'd still be a lot.
But
So, but it's an awful big house.
Well, yeah.
Well, but there's more than one, not just the high rise.
Oh, yeah, they're
There's stuff
scattered
up
all
in
over.
Cedar
bunch.
Creek, there's stuff
Roanoke
up
to-
north
yeah,
on
yeah.
Roanoke and, yeah.
So
Well, if something, if something is worth $226,000 and they're, with their assessed valuation then and stuff, they pay about $1,400 in taxes. Just the city, no, that's all portion. So if it was 3 or 4 times that amount, so maybe 22 is not that, it's not that bad.
Well, I don't know.
that's probably, every 4 units is probably the equivalent of that.
Yeah.
Single-family dwelling.
Yeah.
So if you take 100
But I can do some
divided
checking
by
just for gee
4, you got
whiz.
25, so 25 times.
I might check on that and just see if I can come up with something.
But then all those duplexes and triplexes and the other things they have down on 4th Street and in Roanoke, the old Alco building and.
But
yeah,
I have an audit that tells me how many rentals they've got and stuff, so I can look that up.
Yeah, that'd be curious to know. Not that we're going to change it, but.
All right. Well, I've got some notes here to rework that wording in the first sentence. And then the next piece is just the annual reporting. You might remember at last work session, we covered this, speaking with the EDC on how they could assist us in helping capture some of those metrics and making sure we have that. But we do have to, of course, have that filed. Continuing on, section 5 is just pretty much definitions of what an IRB, a property tax abatement, a sales tax abatement, and an EDX abatement are. So unless there's some questions on that, I'm going to go ahead and keep moving. The next piece is a newer piece, not those that we're used to, we see all the time. This is a speculative building proposal. The language that you have here before you is all highlighted in bright yellow. This does come from other communities that we've been looking at. This is just something that we're hearing is a lot more popular. That's been telling us that this is something that's kind of maybe a newer trend or a more pressing need now. So
There's the stair step.
this is a different set than what we're used to doing because it's a different type of thing.
So when we did the competitive realities report with Jay Garner, this was one of the recommendations, was to try to spur spec building development. It's hard to convince people to build spec buildings, but when we do our project activity report, we keep track of the projects that we can't respond to because we don't have available buildings and what size of buildings that people are looking for. So I think that we have an opportunity to work with developers that might be interested in doing spec buildings in our community and share that information. And then this gives them a little bit of a relief for doing that because they're taking that risk on while the building sits.
And I like that it allows some incentive to continue as long as the building isn't vacant and it's being utilized, because that's where the additional support to the community would come from. See the stair step?
Any other comments on the spec building? Okay. The next one is your fee waiver and fee reductions. This is a much truncated policy from your original one. Your original one leaves out a lot of different items and procedures. And from my comments that I was writing down last time, it seemed that it might be better to have a more broad policy, but this is a great opportunity if you have any feedback. Currently, my last notes said on here that it's just in order to encourage reinvestment and redevelopment, the city can, I should have said can instead of has, by request, and then they can be requested. And if you want to leave any sort of guidelines, if you want it to be, we do it usually, if you remember, for nonprofit housing, Habitat for Humanity comes to you quite frequently, usually at least annually. There have been other programs and other things. Again, your old policy listed lots and lots of different types of things, but mainly those that would spur economic development or that were nonprofit housing. But if there's any specifications you want to add here, this would be a good time. And if you want to leave it broad, we can also just leave it as a one sentence piece and bring them to this body.
We're saying that we've done it in the past. Should we just say that the city might eliminate or reduce various fees?
Yeah, that's, I just caught that when I read it out loud.
Okay.
Yeah, may or
May.
Or might.
Mm-hmm.
And the other, you just put like other projects the commissioners deem.
I could just even leave it less, more open than that. I could just take that last sentence and go waived or reduced fees may be requested in writing to the city commission.
Sure.
And then staff would bring those requests to you at a public meeting.
Yep.
Okay. All right, the next new section in your policy is the RHID. Last time I was asked to send you examples, and I sent you quite a lot, so I apologize for flooding your inbox. RHID policies vary widely. They're usually based on the latest housing study. It has been quite a number of years since we've had a formal housing study here in Newton. So that's definitely on our to-do list. It's on the City Commission's strategic plan for the next few years here. What this pretty much sets forth is a very broad overview discussing how and by what right we can offer this program, the pieces that are necessary according to state law, and what are those types of infrastructure things that they can be rebated. That is pretty much all that's on here, because again, the other policies might give more points or favor certain types of projects. They might look for special development areas like you're looking at. Maybe there's a portion of town or a portion outside of the community that they're wanting to invest in. They have a lot of those different pieces, but they're almost always based on a housing study. So without that factual data, this allows us to say that we do offer them. They're part of our incentives. They're part of our economic development policy, but kind of at the broad level that we're currently sitting at.
I noticed this, I've always thought of this as rural housing.
It was renamed.
It changed.
Oh,
Yes.
it did?
Yes.
Okay.
They expanded it to bigger cities, so they got rid of rural
The
and changed
rural,
to
okay.
reinvestment.
Okay.
Still
So I've seen
RHID.
it in some, well, it is, okay.
I'd like to be the person who names all this stuff. Have such fun.
You could call it Rich's Housing Incentive District.
Okay. Were there any questions with that piece? All right. The next one just lists what those special development areas are. Again, those could be open to discussion, or it kind of gets us right back to where we started. If we do have those areas and districts for development areas, we would show them with the maps. So again, we can come back to that. We can think on that. But that's where what would be sitting right there. Well, actually, we can even put the maps at the back, but we would list them out here. The other thing in a district can also be thought of as not just a land mass that we're looking at. It's formalizing a district like an RHID or a CID or a TIF. And again, we've utilized all those previously in this community, but that gives a little bit of definition for the developers because they might not be as familiar with all of the terms that we're utilizing. The last big piece in this incentive policy would be the fees. And that would be if you are looking for application fees. We did talk a little bit about how fees are becoming more normalized, and Beth's given us some examples of even in your organization and in others where there are application fees for development incentives.
Yeah, so I'm on the state board, and they're raising all of their economic development fees. And initially, I was against it because I kind of feel like we're charging fees for something that's innately good for our community or our state. And so I kind of wasn't sure how I felt about it. Lots of conversation, and the governor or lieutenant governor was talking about, if you set a couch out on the curb and you say free, it's going to sit there. But if you put it on Marketplace and say $200, you could sell it 10 times. And it's kind of like the same thing with your community. Quit giving yourself away for free. And so I do agree with that. I think there's things to work through as far as percentages and size of projects and things. But after thinking through it a long time, I support us recouping some funds and not acting like we're the free community that is giving away the couch. So
this is a place, because those fees might change, where we are, again, hoping to adopt a fee resolution. And so that's then here cited by fee resolution. So if those fees were to change, which would be a lot more variable from time to time than maybe a place where we're going to develop that would sit longer, that would be easier to update in a fee resolution.
I haven't looked at that to know. The state one, we had it where we were ready to take it forward, and we're having to look at it again because the percentage, it gets us in a situation where a company that might be a smaller project, they're paying a larger sum. And so really have to dig into it to make sure that it's not going to get to a crazy, like if we looked at a GAF or something
Right.
like that. That's
And what we don't have here yet is whether it would be a percentage fee
Okay,
or a simple flat fee.
Yeah.
We have proposed previously to have a simple flat fee for the applications, just to cover administrative time of something like $2,000 or $2,500. We've seen a lot of things in that realm, so that it's just a flat fee that covers some of the staff expenses and time of managing the different parts of an application of this size or development project. Again, others have an annual fee as well to continue to manage that as a smaller portion. And we could bring you a list of fees if you're interested, but looking for direction on if that's something you're interested in, and if you'd like to see some communities. We had a few of them at last work session, but
Yeah, I mean, if you're offsetting the revenue side and you're getting so much development that your staff time's through the roof and you have to add another FTE, you know, I mean, you know,
Yeah, you look at like Panasonic and the state
Right.
had to hire, I think, 2 people to manage that project. You can see it. But I think having a list of all the fees is also helpful because even like with the tax abatement, you know, the filing fee there are a lot of things that the company writes a check for that accompany their incentive that I think it can add up, and it can add up for some of these smaller projects that we want to win because they're the bread and butter of our community. So just making sure that we're mindful of those costs too. I know. And then I keep talking. I keep pulling.
well, I think that gets me to the end of the comments I had for today.
got a lot of wordsmithing to incorporate all that, but I appreciate everybody's input and time on that. Did you have anything, Donna, on the financing of the improvements that you wanted to point out or share, like the last page of the document? Looks like it's probably a rework of,
This is a rework. Sorry, I was working off my old one. She was just telling me. This is the one that was adopted by resolution, and we would just work it in on a small one.
I don't see anything, did you?
Cool document.
anything?
Good.
If there's no other questions on those, I think we can move on to our other commission policies.
Okay.
Oh. This is going to let me keep talking. All right, going to your very large stack of stapled papers. We'll walk through this just in the time that we have remaining here. You'll see a redlined document here. Some of these were done. We'll have some questions, but currently the red lines are just while we're editing it. The policy code development piece of this is taking out the administrative policies. This had city commission policies, which are what you all set to help forward the city. And then we have a whole set of administrative policies. And staff is trying to separate those two pieces so that the ones that are for the commission, of the commission, by the commission, can be reviewed on a more frequent basis. And then the administrative policies we have about how we reserve a conference room, or how we're gonna open and close this, or how we're gonna do that, are more of a city hall piece, and we don't have to deal with them all at the same time. So the edits here are just decoupling the city commission policies from the administrative policies set by the city manager to make it a little bit more manageable. Policy 2 is, staff is recommending that we no longer award keys to the city, since I don't know if anybody remembers the last time we did that.
Yeah, we don't have any, we got rid of all those that we had before.
Who lost them?
They had the ugly logo on it. So, yeah. Some of these that have been taken out are just so old that they don't even, like this one, aren't even valid right now. So that's why they're redlined out, if you're wondering why some of this is taken out.
I'm going to go ahead and skip the proclamation policy because that'll take some more discussion, and I'm going to come back. I'm going to keep going through some of the ones that staff is proposing for deletes. The new business item policy and the city commission agenda policy, those are in your city commission procedures book that you might remember that Denise was so good last year to put together for you guys. So some of these we already had updated in a different manner. The notice of hearing policy remains the same. There's a question about whether you want us to have a agendas and minutes and supporting materials. It says for trade boards, but of course this could be for other items as well. Again, maybe put a pin in it while we go through. The policy for selecting the mayor remains the same. And then you're going to notice a lot of deleted lines from all those economic development policies that we just reviewed. The annexation policy
That's a nice move that we corrected that.
remains the same.
Yeah.
And so does the appropriation request procedures. That's when we get requests from outside entities asking for funding from the city. The city stationery and use letterhead remains the same. Again, we don't usually use paper stationery as much anymore, but this is really discussing about when we utilize the office of the city commissioners, the mayor, to endorse legislation, to offer support for a project or a proposal, and that we do have a policy for that. We did remove the employee recognition policy because that's not something that's been done here before this body in quite some time.
That is also in the personnel manual now.
Right. The personnel policy development and application process, again, moved to the administrative policies. The policy for evaluating the city manager, all we did on this policy was add on the city attorney, since you do them in the same way and at the same time. There's a policy establishing the annual review of commission policies, which staff should bring to you annually.
Policy on policy.
And then the financing public improvement ones you saw already redone. That's why that one's all highlighted, so that we could continue that forward. We then do have the waiver of building, electrical, mechanical, and plumbing fees. It sounded like we were going to take this policy from our current discussion just a few minutes ago and bring it down to just those couple key phrases. So then we would go ahead and delete this very large policy here. The petitions of lots, I think we're still, I don't know if we had a chance to look through our subdivision regulations to see if that's in there by reference. We do have a code of ethics and standards of conduct, which we did not change, but it is a little long, so we can always go through that too and go through how that would happen. And then the other one that's quickly taken out is the policy on the citizens forum, again, because that's in your procedure manual. So that was a very quick overview of why there's so much redlined in this packet.
What's the document called that you're referring to? That it's called the Governing Body Procedure Manual? Is that what it's called? I just want to,
We have a governing body handbook, and
The
then we
gov-
have a meeting procedure, commission meeting procedure manual.
I apologize, I was confusing
no, that's okay.
those two.
We have two different manuals, and you looked at those, we adopted those last year sometime, maybe the year before,
I think it was November of '23.
might have been November 23.
The year before.
We can pull them back out if you would like them.
I got it somewhere.
Is the new business items policy and the city commission agenda policy, are those in the governing body handbook?
I
or
believe
the
so.
Other one? Okay.
While she's looking for that, I'm going to go ahead and go through the edits for the proclamation policy. Denise and I had gone through a lot of the comments that we'd been collecting from all of you on the bench, and also from other cities, other city clerks, what they thought of as best practices, and looking through lots of key items. And these are the phrases that kind of came to the top as a potential update for your policy. Instead of saying that the purpose is to provide a procedure to allow recognition to be granted in worthwhile events or accomplishments, the purpose was reworded to say the purpose of a proclamation is to increase awareness of an important issue, to celebrate an annual event, or to honor a group's accomplishments. And we also added in that it's not legally binding and it's only honorary in nature. We also took out a piece that said that the person would be responsible for costs incurred in making the proclamation. And in practice, a proclamation is really just a piece of paper at the bench, and you don't really have a lot of expenses incurred in that piece. And then we added, again, more expenses that had to do with city-operated ones, but then we added a bullet point that said a proclamation issued by the mayor and city commission does not mean the mayor or the city commission endorses the group or project. That was a phrase that we were seeing in a lot of other cities when they were doing proclamations, because that was a way to be able to recognize a lot of the people that wanted to support their important issue, to celebrate their annual event, or to honor their group's accomplishments without having to show that it was a political endorsement. So. And then we removed the item that if the proclamation lacks a local sponsor, that the city commission can review it. So you would have to have somebody come and bring the proclamation forward. Did I miss anything on that?
Oh, and we did ask other cities similar in our size and that to see what their policies were. And so we kind of took a couple of the things out of some of those policies and put them into what we have in here, because we thought they were a good fit.
Any comments on the proclamation edits? Okay, well then I will continue moving forward. Trying to find the ones that we had a lot of changes to. Don't think there were very many. Actually, yes. It pretty much gets us close to the end, besides the ones that would be moved into an economic development policy and the ones that we suggested remain the same. If we want to have a policy here or edit another document, this would be where we'd want to talk about potentially for the agendas and minutes and supporting materials, either just for the trade boards, or if we wanted to have this for all ad hoc committees, or how did you, if you wanted a policy here, some guidance on this would be helpful. And if memory serves, these trade boards actually got consumed into the Planning and Commission and Board of Zoning Appeals, so this would need to be completely reworked to include either advisory boards or something else, as the Planning Commission already follows these.
So this would be where we would say that boards that are appointed by the commission would be expected to go through Coracoma, or
You could utilize it for that, yes, or if you wanted.
She's at the trades thing. I'm looking for it.
There's not page numbers.
Called agendas, minutes, and supporting materials. It's right after the notice of hearing policy.
It's renumbered to be 1-4. It was originally 1-7. So in its current format, it doesn't make a lot of sense because of how we've moved things around. But before we just simply deleted it, if the goal is to have these things in a specific process and procedure, then we wanted to offer that.
Here it is. It's real close to the front.
Rebecca, what if we reworked it to include all the boards, Komokora, kind of the normal rigmarole of our processes, make it kind of generic, but at least there's something in writing that says, this is the expectation, these are the minutes, these are.
Sure, we can certainly write
Maybe we
this
can
up
start
to,
there.
yeah, to say agendas, minutes, and supporting materials for city commission appointed boards.
Because I haven't even thought of this until now. I mean, I've been thinking about,
Yeah,
you know,
because
we don't deal with them.
Again, as it's in its current form, it was no longer applicable, but before we just deleted it, it seemed like it might have had a reasoning that might be similar to today's world. Again, if there's policies that you wanted to see edits and we didn't make, like selecting the mayor or something else, more than open for it, but that's pretty much exactly what occurs every year. The annexation policy, still in its same format.
what's the highlighted? Is that a rework? Something needs to be tweaked? I think it's public interest of the individual landowners and the long-term public interest may not be compatible. I mean,
Oh, yeah, that's a piece, I think, where we realized that there was a verb
Yeah.
or a conjunction that does not make a lot of sense.
yeah.
So I think that the suggestion would be,
I was just looking at this, selecting the mayor, and the person who receives the most votes and the second person, they're going to have a year under their belt before they are able to do that anyway. So I'm not sure how this applies. It says they shall not serve as mayor during their first year unless the newly elected, let's see, no, the mayor of the city of Newton shall be the person who received the most votes, except when the person is in his or her first year of office. Well, if, let's say somebody's running for the first time and they receive the most votes, they're not going to be mayor that when they take office right away. It's always a year. So
Yeah.
that doesn't really, I guess to me, unless I'm just missing something, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And if the voters put that person there, then
It says the newly elected commissioner shall not serve as mayor of the city during their first year in office, is what it says.
well, I know, but what
There's no way,
Policy 2.
yeah.
I mean, shall not serve as mayor during their first year. Well, nobody that's elected in the election year, no one that's elected in that year is going to serve as mayor or that year that they immediately step into office. And then that number two, if somebody received the most votes in the election, let's just say 2023, somebody received the most votes, he or she would not be taking mayor until 2025, even if it was their first time to run, even if they'd never run before. So how, help me see what I'm not.
I think it leaves some space. So top vote getter traditionally would be vice mayor their first year.
Sure, right.
Right.
But they're going to be the mayor. Well, I guess what
And
I'm,
if something were to happen to the mayor during that first year and the commission wanted to move the vice mayor into that role, which would be the natural progression, I think the way it's written allows that to happen.
There's also a case of, this has happened years and years ago, that we will have had the top vote getter, they would have received the vice mayor, election. And then that person did not want to serve as mayor. And so they never served as mayor that whole time. So I don't know if that confuses things more or not.
No, but it's non-binding. It's
a
tradition.
non-binding, yeah.
The policy acknowledges that, and I think they're getting into that scenario that Denise is talking about. That person doesn't want to serve. I think this commission in 81 wanted to set forth a policy. Okay, if we get to that scenario, maybe we shouldn't put someone that's in their first year as mayor,
So-
even though that would be essentially non-binding and they could revoke this policy, get around it, but I think it's a
Here-
stated policy.
Well,
Yeah,
can I
here's
use
the little, oh,
an
go ahead.
example? Okay, so Rich, he got the most votes in '23. Let's say that was his first year to ever run.
He would have automatically been in the vice mayor position because the person in 2021 was the vice mayor and they would be mayor in 2023 or
What if we just-
2022.
He's not going to, he wasn't a mayor. I guess and maybe I'm just trying to be too technical. It says he's received the most votes, let's say Rich, 23, the recent election, except when the person is in his or her first year of office. Well, he can't be mayor his first year of office, i.e. 24, until 25 comes, because there's always that year lag. Am I making too much of that language? If I am, then just tell
Well,
me
if that person that's mayor quits, though, that's when he would get moved up. So that's what it's speaking to.
Or they pass away.
Or they
That's what
pass
it's
away.
allowing for. What if we added the
Well-
procedure, mayor for city of Newton will be selected by commissioners themselves, following the non-binding guidelines outlined in the policy above. So then that gives the commission the swing and the sway.
The commission will still have the final
Right.
say.
Yeah, here's a little bit of a reasoning that why this policy was put into place. They had been following that policy years and years ago. It was somebody's turn to be, they were vice mayor, and it was somebody's turn to be mayor, and they decided on the commission not to appoint him mayor. And that was a decision of the other 4 commissioners. So that's kind of why this was put into place.
And we've had that happen at least twice for 2 different reasons.
Yeah.
One, because maybe the group didn't want to choose that person, and the other time was because that individual had a very demanding job and said,
And didn't want
I
to,
want to pass this on to the next person.
yeah.
While I believe that I can serve as a commissioner, I just don't think I have the bandwidth
Correct.
Yeah,
for
no
mayor at this
time.
And this happened before, the first one I was talking about was with the commissioner, Walt Clausen was the commissioner at that time. And so that was before any of us were here, but anybody who knows him.
40 years ago.
Yeah, that's when this came about, just so you
And
know.
on the other hand, I think Willis Heck served either 2 or 3 years in a row.
And Willis did, because Matt
Because-
Treaster
Yeah.
wanted, he
Didn't have the capacity.
He did not have the capacity, so he passed it down. Willis was mayor one year, then I think Matt was supposed to be mayor. He passed it down, and then the next year, somebody else passed it down because they did not. So Willis served like three terms of mayor.
Seemed like it was Ken Hall or somebody like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that didn't have the time.
So the current mayor would stay the current mayor and not, the vice mayor wouldn't turn over to,
If that's what they wanted to do. Kathy, I think you served in that capacity also when David Nygaard passed away. So you served as mayor for a little bit longer
I served in his.
in his
finished
absence,
out his year,
and
I
then
served in 19.
and then you served in yours. Yeah. We can sure clean this up to make it a little bit more
Yeah, I think.
understandable.
Policy C1 speaks to newly elected commissioners, and policy C2 speaks to existing commissioners, I think. But if you can clean it up.
We can clean it up. I think this is, like I said, this is an old policy, so.
I'm just being technical. I mean, I'm just
I
looking
see
at
what you're
each.
saying.
do you really think 1 year is enough? I mean, to serve as a commissioner? I mean, I get some people have some more, like, are more savvy with budgets and taxes and things like that than I am. But say you get people like me that come in, I'm like, there'd be no way I would want to do that job right now because I don't have the knowledge or
You would,
anything to do that. But
It was a lot. I think the
It's a lot to
difference
learn.
is that this is the mayor is still just a commissioner. You don't have
Exactly.
any more power.
exactly. You sign
than anybody
documents.
else. So you get to be the one to sign all the beer permits on the
Cut
30th of
Cut
December.
ribbons, shake
Yeah.
hands, and kiss babies.
Shake hands and kiss
You dig
babies. and,
dirt.
Yeah, you
you know,
can take
it-
pictures.
symbolic.
Yeah,
And I think when Rich hasn't been able to make it to a meeting or something like that, he asks Kathy, and if she can't make that either, then another commissioner serves in that capacity to sign, or to, be the one that shakes hands, kisses babies, and cuts ribbons.
Hope you don't get that mixed up.
Yes.
Now, can you, I know you kind of explained this already, but can you kind of repeat it? Why did we, because I know at one point we did, years ago, people elected the mayor and now.
We have never elected the mayor. The city has always been a commission manager form of government. We would have to change the form of government in order to elect a mayor. Yeah, through a charter ordinance.
Okay.
And we visited that topic here when Clint was here. And
Yeah,
we all
there wasn't
decided
a
to
lot of,
continue as we were.
yeah.
Yep. And the public, what little of the public responded to that, we're all
Right.
in agreement we needed to stay where we're at. So,
Just before we head out, I know we've got another meeting coming up in just a couple minutes. Direction for staff for next steps. I'll start with the economic development policy. Do you feel like you need to see it again in another work session? Would you like to see a first read of it at your regular session meetings? What's the feel of the group?
Well, I'm good for another work session because this is where we get to but maybe sending it to us to review, but I think a work session, I don't know. We may not need a long.
I'm fine
Yeah,
with
I'm
one. I
with
don't.
Maybe a 6 o'clock one
6
instead of
o'clock is
5:30?
probably fine.
Anybody?
When are you thinking that you would like to do that? I know that, Rich, are you gone at this next meeting? Is that correct?
I am gone at the agenda review.
At the
but
agenda
I
review,
will be
okay.
at the meeting.
Okay.
Well, how long does staff think they need for all of this? And aren't we
We-
planning another, kind of a work session on a different topic?
We have another one that we're working on for that first meeting in February, which would be the 11th. And so you could either do it at this next meeting, which would be the 28th, or we could schedule it for the 25th. Or also, if the 11th doesn't happen to pan out for the other one.
So maybe the 11th or the 25th, depending on how the other one.
That would be all the way into
I'm at all of
February.
them, so.
Yeah, or I think we could probably make the 28th work as well.
Yeah.
so,
Okay.
The end of the month.
Let's
Yeah.
keep forward progress. Let's plan for the 28th, and if we
Okay.
have to punt to the
6
11th,
o'clock.
then
6 o'clock?
Is that okay? Yes.
So then taking those comments, taking what we have written down, and we'll go ahead and go through both policies since they are so interconnected. One's really
That's the 28th of January, right?
yes.
can we do the 11th? I have a conflict.
Okay.
So the 11th may or may not be for the other.
Oh, yeah.
So the 25th of February then?
You want to wait till the 25th?
Yeah, I've got overlaps. I can't.
And the
25th of February works great for
Okay.
this to come back up.
Okay.
Okay. So 25th then.
And at 6 o'clock, and we'll bring the economic development policy all reformatted and the rest of the policies that it will sit within as well with the edits that we've
Okay.
discussed.
All right. Thank you. February the 25th.
Should this other one not pan out, would you want to do that on the 11th? The other work session pan out, would that be a second option?
Yes.
Okay. We will plan on the 25th unless you hear otherwise.
Okay. All right.
thank you.
I guess we are done.
We are adjourned for 5 minutes.